Hello, hello. Fillionaire here, and today I am joined by a very, very special guest. I have with me here today Abhishek, who is the DeFi infra lead for P2 Ventures, formerly known as Polygon Ventures, and we are going to be having an extremely interesting conversation today. I'm really, really excited to have you on. Thank you so, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Fillionaire. I also thank you for having me. Also, I really like your name, the Fillionaire.
Believe it or not, the name
Goes
came
with
to
the whole
me
DeFi
about
theme of this
15 years
conversation.
ago, and apparently I woke up from a dream and I announced that I'm going to be a billionaire, and I went back to sleep. And when I woke back up, somebody told me that I had said this, and so obviously at that moment I was like, "Well, I'm rebranding everything," and so I carried it into my DeFi adventures with me. Absolutely, absolutely, it definitely came
It
from
was a
above.
divine intervention,
So
let's say that.
before we hop into the conversation, I would love to, just hear a few words about yourself, introduce yourself to everybody, and kind of let everybody know about your background and how you got into what you're doing today.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Abhishek. I take care of all infrastructure, DeFi. It's infra, DeFi, enterprise, and consumer, except gaming. I lead all of those verticals for P2 Ventures, formerly known as Polygon Ventures. This fund acts both kind of as an ecosystem venture arm and a separate VC fund that is formed out of Polygon. Uh, and we invest across beyond Polygon ecosystem as well. How I got into crypto was in 2016. Back then, I was an operator like on Web2, so I was core team member for two startups, both consumer and enterprise, and we eventually were able to exit those startups as well. But in 2016, I saw just the Bitcoin price going up, and I probably got in with the speculation aspect. But being an engineer from education, as I learned more about ETH and how it operates, I realized this is going to change the world. And I moved to the US in 2020 and for my masters, did my masters, and eventually thought to go crypto full time. So since then,
Awesome.
I've
It's
been at
funny too.
B2
I
Ventures.
myself also come from a SaaS background. I worked pretty much exclusively in emerging industries. I had a successful exit in 3D printing of all industries. I had a successful exit in AR VR, and so during my time there,
Incredible.
I figured all of this knowledge and skill set that I used to grow these companies from scratch into successful exits actually translates very, very beautifully into the Web3 industry. Of course, with its own nuances, and of course with kind of its own sort of rules and distribution channels. But yeah, a lot of the knowledge from kind of the SaaS industry and from the traditional tech industry actually flows over quite nicely into Web3, which is always very interesting to see. And as we enter this kind of bull run, right? Anytime that there's any sort of momentum on price, you actually see a lot of people coming over into the Web3 industry saying, "What's going on over here? It looks like a money making opportunity. It looks like something interesting is happening." And so a lot of my friends from Web2 are calling me daily, weekly, saying, "Phil, what do I do? How do I get in? What what do I work on?" So it's really nice to see. It's nice to see the industry really starting to mature and get the attention of some of the smartest people I know. And so yeah, no, really, really awesome.
I agree. I agree. The industry goes when it has more builders and better entrepreneurs, and that is what we need. Both builders, like we need entrepreneurs, and we also need users. So I'm glad everyone from Web2, builders, entrepreneurs, and even capital allocators are in this space, and those are the three things you need to
Absolutely,
make any
absolutely.
industry
We
big.
we are
And
building.
we're in this journey
Well,
together.
let's hop right in. I think first and foremost, I would love to talk about just the DeFi landscape as a whole. I mean, it has definitely evolved very, very rapidly in the recent years. How would you define the current state of decentralized capital markets, and what is the most exciting thing for you about this evolution?
Yeah, DeFi. I'm super passionate about DeFi. Like DeFi is what got like, besides just the tech, the first use on my blockchain was a DeFi use case, right? I just swapped something. Everybody who comes on the blockchain, for the most part, when you're doing something on chain, you start with DeFi. So in terms of like where DeFi is in its current form, I think we are in, I would call it both like an innovation phase of sorts, where we are trying to build these building blocks that will eventually have a lot of adoption. So innovation happens and then adoption happens, right? If you look at, I categorize between this innovation, I categorize into two buckets. One is building net new things, which is like USDC is a stable coin that earns 22% yield by funding rate, right? Like it's incredible, right? That is something net new, and the stable coin can be used like anywhere where currency is used. So that is something net new. And then the second part is building the same things that already exist in Web 2, but on chain, and continuously making sure that these things are just better, faster, and cheaper, better UX, faster execution, and cheaper to use. So on the second part, when I say we are on the innovation side, we are just making these things that already exist in the traditional financial world better, faster, cheaper, and we are on that journey. Big metrics that I track here for adoption is like percentage of DEX to SEX usage. It peaked at 15% right now, I believe. On the month, it's like at a 12%. But you want to see that breakout and get more user adoption. I also track like what is the perp ratio, like these futures on crypto, how much are on centralized exchange, how much are on DeFi rails, and that is much lower than just the spot. So these are like the adoption metrics of just the traditional products, right? And these net new innovations is what I'm a little more excited about, because these traditional products will be in their own journey. New infrastructure will come, they'll adopt, and this ratios that I talked about will increase and adoption will be there. But what I'm really excited about are all these innovative things that are happening. Two major things here is like stable coins. There's obviously, Circle is the OG. Circle was the OG of this, but later all of these new innovative stable coins are also coming. RWA backed stable coins are also coming. And then we are seeing a lot of Web2 adoption of these stable coins, such as Stripe, one of the companies that everybody respects a lot, had this major acquisition. So incredibly excited about the mainstream adoption of stable coins. Beyond that, I think when you talk about DeFi, or when you talk about like DeFi and like who will get adoption of this DeFi, it's not just retail, it's actually the traditional financial world. They have to adopt DeFi, and that is where it comes to like the second vertical I'm very excited about, which is RWA. We saw a lot of traction on these T-bills on DeFi rails. Tokenization is getting a lot of attention. So I'm excited about this space and adoption of this space by institutional TradFi, which eventually brings this to mainstream from an innovation perspective. So yeah, that is how I think about the space. We're in the innovation part of the space, and there are two things, the net new products as well as the traditional
Absolutely.
products.
And I think for me, it's somebody who sort of works on the one-to-many side, right? I look at, adoption, and I look at what growth curves look like for specific companies, as well as, the industry as a whole. What I'm actually seeing right now, and this is a concept that I talk about quite often, is confidence. I'm seeing a growth in confidence, and I think that is actually stemming from a couple of factors. One being regulatory clarity. I think we are starting to see a lot more regulatory clarity, and I think we are starting to see a lot more willingness from regulators to participate in this, evolution of finance. And I think what's required for mass adoption is clear definitions for what those regulations are. I think regardless of what eventually those regulations become, everybody needs to know that they are clearly defined such that they're not operating in a gray area. I think when it comes to adopting new technology, most people are comfortable with operating in a gray area When it comes to money, however, I think people start becoming significantly more skeptical. And so I think the regulatory clarity is such a huge component of what is starting to drive more adoption, more confidence, sort of giving people, reinforcing people's beliefs that, the way that they are operating in this new financial economy is safe and secure, and they know the law, and they know kind of how to work around it. And I think the other point that you mentioned that is extremely important for me, but I think is also extremely important for the industry at large, is ease of use, right? Is, if you remember, crypto, DeFi, all these platforms emerging, 2015, 2016, I mean, this stuff looked scary. Like it looked like a damn terminal, and what we're used to these days is simplified UIs. I need one click to get where I'm going. Amazon simplified the one click checkout. And so, we as a people, especially tech forward people, have been so accustomed to, ease of use, that I think embracing that as an industry in crypto, in DeFi, I think is extremely important, right? And I'm seeing these two things really starting to evolve. Like I said, there's so many bright minds coming over from the Web 2 space who have built some of the best technologies in the Web 2 space, who are now putting their efforts forth to work on some of these Web 3 projects. And so, I wish that I was a user in Web 3. I started using Web 3 now, because when I started using Web 3, I mean, man, there were so many mistakes, so many issues, so many, just bad things happened because the whole thing was confusing and it just wasn't easy to understand. And so, yeah, I think to second your point, I'm definitely seeing, a growth in innovation. I'm seeing the migration of Web 2 into Web 3 protocols, and so bringing that all onto the blockchain. And then I'm seeing this wave of confidence, this wave of adoption that is being brought on by regulatory clarity, as well as ease of use and simplification of user interfaces, and kind of the whole funnel. So yeah, it's really great to see, and I think ultimately that's what we all want, is we all want mass adoption, we all want the industry to grow, and so we need to continue moving in that direction. Which actually brings me to my next question. I think from your perspective, right, we're seeing all of this innovation, we're seeing, kind of net new products coming to market. What are the areas within the crypto industry that you think require the most focus in order to continue sustaining this growth, in order to continue sustaining this innovation?
In terms of areas which will continue to sustain this growth, I would actually go back to what you said. It's actually just two things. On the institutional side, it's regulatory clarity, and on the consumer side, it's just user experience. And the user experience comes from better infrastructure, both on, let's say, intents can be used in DeFi more to give a much better user experience than just doing 10 transactions to get to one objective, right? So there is infrastructure that will lead to great UX. That is one bucket, and obviously then regulatory clarity is a big one, which limits a lot of projects in what they can do and what users they can support, just because they don't have the clarity as of now. Even like in token economics, as basic, which is not particularly DeFi, like at basic things, like having a fee switch in your token economics, right? You cannot have that right now. It's still quite kind of unclear. That makes it, even the clarity on that would be helpful. So a lot of regulatory clarity, UX, and
yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's always funny, when people ask me that question, they expect some really in-depth, complicated answer, and I'm like, no, man, it's really quite simple. It really there's not that many variables. We just need to nail it. We need to get it right. And so, to your point, I definitely 100% agree. So interesting question, kind of looking at, sort of scaling and growth and kind of what are the factors that are going to lead to it. in your opinion, how critical is interoperability between blockchain ecosystems to the growth of decentralized capital markets, right? So basically being able to seamlessly move between blockchains and projects that are building for specific blockchains versus projects that are blockchain agnostic. What are your thoughts on that?
I think interoperability is an essential part of good UX. If we want the UX to improve, you have to have that interoperability and it has to be seamless. Um, and like right now, you see how frustrating it is to just use bridges to do everything. Then you have slippage on those bridges, and it's just a bad user experience. Uh, interop and the final solution for that interoperability is a composability across different blockchains. So what our thesis is that there will be a lot of blockchains. Some of these will be general purpose blockchains, some of these will be special purpose blockchain. But DeFi is kind of a base infrastructure that will be everywhere to facilitate like just movement of value, right? And then all of these blockchains have to be interoperable, and they have to be interoperable at a composability level. You have to be able to compose between these separate blockchains. Like there are some solutions that are out there. Um, shared sequences is what people proposed amongst L2s for composability. I'm not a big fan, like particularly a big fan of that approach. Maybe a better approach is super builders, which just can attach to your L2s and give you composability. Ag layer is trying to unify liquidity. It's not necessarily block level composability, but approving layer does create a I would rather say much faster bridge, better user experience bridge across these blockchains. So there are multiple approaches, but yes, interoperability incredibly critical. Ideally, we need to have block level composability, and and the
Absolutely.
solutions
And
that
I
are
think
building towards it. So
in my
fingers
line
crossed.
of work and kind of what I see, especially on the retail side, and I do say this quite often, if you are currently building a blockchain business and you are not incorporating chain interoperability, it is not going to succeed. It's just not going to work out. This is not 2022. This is not 2023. We are not siloing ourselves as an industry. I think we are starting to understand that the more we incorporate different ecosystems into our product's abilities, the more it helps us scale. And I think even more so for the retail user, they do not care what chain their transaction is operating on. When I am buying something online or
Yeah.
trading online, I do not need to deep dive into the complexities of the back end of my transaction in order to be satisfied with the end result. And so when I'm processing a transaction, I need it to move quickly, I need it to be secure, and I need to make sure that it actually works. What's happening on the back end is definitely not a concern for me as a retail user. And I think even more interestingly, at CrossFi, we are building a non-custodial, decentralized crypto to fiat payment system, right? And so when I'm using a CrossFi card at the store, the last thing on my mind is what chains this transaction is being processed in and kind of what is the routing on the back end and what's making it more efficient or what's making it less efficient. I'm trying to pay for my purchase. I'm trying to get out of there as quickly as possible, and then I'm trying to go get value out of the thing that I'm purchasing. And so, to your point, I think right now there are solutions and there are teams kind of building in that direction, but I think even more so in the future when we do see mass adoption, it really is going to be like the hidden back end of the internet. Most people sending an email do not know about SMTP protocol. Most people that are visiting a website do not know what the back end technology is that powers these websites, whether you have built an HTML or a headless CMS or all of these deeper, more complex technical layers. None of that matters to the retail user. And so I think it is our job as an industry to simplify, to continue making these things easy to use without necessarily overcomplicating it with technical jargon and giving people too many decisions to make, and just generally making our products easier to use and understand to build confidence.
I 100% agree. And to your point, there are two things to it. Like I probably talked about just the underlying infrastructure, but what you talked about is abstracting away all of the 10 things you need to do to leverage that infrastructure and making it more simple for the user. So the infrastructure enables good UX, but then we need consumer facing applications or consumer facing products that make it very simple. Like you talked about the card, right? It's just tap and go. I don't need to care what's happening in the
Absolutely.
back end.
Getting the
I just
value,
paid and
immediate
I got
value.
my
And
stuff
that's
done.
what I wake up thinking about every morning is how to get users to value as quickly as possible. In growth marketing, we call it the aha moment. How quickly can we get somebody to the aha moment where they realize the value of your
Yeah.
product and then basically become a power user and then create that flywheel where they invite their friends and now we're talking growth, right? So getting them to that moment as quickly as possible is instrumental.
And it is so, it has always bothered me that how much in Web 2 we used to obsess about this and how much less in Web 3 we talk about that, right? Web 3 people talk about like incredible tech jargon and we are going into like how execution of transactions happen and how we can parallelize it. This is what we are talking about in Web 3. But in Web 2, we were literally fascinated by a swipe mechanism that someone released in their mobile application, and that increased conversion by 60% or something. But I think we'll get there. As any application that gets more users will have to certainly think of UX.
Absolutely. And I
Uh,
think it also goes to show
They have to be
how
UX
much more
first.
room there is to grow and mature in our industry. And I think, I watched Web 2 go from features to benefits. Like I watched that phenomenon happen. Everybody was talking about, when the cloud came out, everybody's talking about scalability and infrastructure and it's so technical. And now like there's nothing that's not on the cloud unless you specifically require something that's on-prem and the medical industry for example, but realistically the same thing is happening in Web3, and so I'm seeing this shift happen live, and it's very reminiscent for me of what I saw happen in Web2, and so it's really nice to see, and it gives me the signal, the early indicator that the industry is maturing, it is evolving, and we are actually now building for users. We are building for scale, not this niche little silo of cypherpunks that used to be our community 10 years ago. And so when we think about scale, right? When we think about mass adoption, I think
I
there is no conversation about mass adoption without talking about TradFi and the TradFi industries. In your opinion, based on kind of your experience and the trends that you're seeing, what are the biggest opportunities for collaboration between TradFi and DeFi, and what are some of those challenges that you think must be overcome to build that trust and continue growing that adoption?
Yeah, in terms of collaboration with TradFi, there are two ways of it, very at a very broad level. TradFi using DeFi rails and DeFi using TradFi rails. Like, so if you talk about DeFi using TradFi rails, that is where the better UX comes from. Like, okay, everybody still uses cards. The example that you made, you still have to partner with Visa, etc., but to make these. Have your money on chain but have a card transact. That's DeFi using TradFi rails for better UX. Similarly, TradFi will use a lot of DeFi rails uh, for again better UX on their side of things, such as you know just cross-border payment. Why are we still not using stable coins? Like, why are we still using an outdated system? And there are three of us, not just Swift. There's another one that BRICS came out with. There is another one that China has. There is another one that Russia has. There are multiples of those. It could be a simple stable coin, right? Similarly, the global settlement can happen on chain. Assets can be registered on chain. Assets can be traded on chain. Big financial assets can be traded on chain. You don't have to have settlement time in finance, things like that. So there, on the I'd call it RWA side, or literally every part that we have currently in the financial ecosystem can use DeFi rails to make it just more efficient and faster. And again, on the DeFi people, we don't have to be purist. We can use TradFi Rails to give good UX till the time TradFi
Yeah,
eventually
absolutely. And I
adopts
think we're
blockchain
already
for
starting
everything.
to see, I mean, obviously there are glimmers of, governments thinking about strategic Bitcoin reserves and banks starting to, get into the ETF game, so on and so forth. And so I do see that there's this slow but steady migration of TradFi into the world of DeFi. And, at CrossFi, that's really our only aim is to bridge those two worlds. So it's bringing Web3 natives or folks that are unbanked and don't have access to banking infrastructure and bringing them into the global economy, giving them a way to basically, use their crypto in the real world and make IRL transactions. And I think to your point, the the adoption curve is definitely not. I would say it's not parabolic quite yet. I think there's definitely some hurdles that need to be cleared, and I do think one of those major hurdles, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, is indeed this kind of regulatory clarity, right? Like, is this kosher? Is this is this going to work across the board? And I think with the fragmented landscape that we have right now, like the cross-border payments and things like RWA and synthetic assets, I mean, there's so much innovation happening, and I think it's regulatory clarity catching up to the innovation that is really kind of what the headwind is, rather than innovation not moving quick enough. And so I think as we continue to innovate as an industry and as regulatory clarity becomes more transparent and I think things become a bit more black and white rather than kind of this gray area that some of us are operating in right now, I think we will actually start to see this amazing blend of TradFi and DeFi. And TradFi, for all intents and purposes, they are really ultimately after yield, and you just don't see yields like you do in Web3 in the world of Web2. And so I think they're all, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I'm having conversations with all of my friends in finance, and I'm talking crypto, and they're looking at me like I'm absolutely out of my mind. And now the conversations look significantly different. I think I have friends working for major hedge funds and investment banks, and the amount of research and learning that they are doing right now, and all the money that is sitting on the sidelines waiting for regulatory clarity, I think mostly to really enter the space, is phenomenal to see, and it makes me really happy every time I have a chat with one of my friends in finance, because I see it moving, and I see how different it is from 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was having the same conversations, but the reactions were significantly different. Yeah,
Slowly,
totally.
then all that
Well,
once.
I think this
That's
is
what we
a,
hope.
as far as humans go, right? When I think of humans, the word community comes to mind. That is how I consider all of CrossFi's users, all of, just Web3 users as a whole. We are a community, and then we are also, parts of different communities. So our audience today is very passionate about DeFi and decentralized markets. What is the role, do you think, that the broader community can play in driving innovation and adoption in the space? Is there anything that, if you had a call to action for the Web3 community as a whole, what would it be?
I think different people in the community can play different roles, but I think one role that everybody can play is the role of an evangelist. Uh, it is knowing knowing what are the actual benefits that anyone can get from these things, and showing those people how to leverage those benefits, right? uh, I'll give you a very dumb example. I was with my in-laws, and I was talking to my father-in-law and how I can get like great yields on USDC on crypto, and he's a smart guy. He follows Bitcoin, etc. He follows those sovereign Bitcoin, etc. All of those things. Um, and when I told him how it works, he really he actually told me, okay, why don't you do it for me or show me how it's done? And now this dude who's 60 something is on chain, which I never thought that would happen, right? But yes, if you have to be an evangelist. It'll be easier to get some people across the line. It'll be harder, but one thing you could do is just talk about the thing that you like about in DeFi, and if someone else is interested, help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you look at the, sort of user journey, right, for a DeFi product or for a Web3 product. Evangelist is usually the last step in the journey, right? So you have to engage somebody, you have to activate somebody, you need to monetize that user, you need to give them value, and then ultimately they become this evangelist. And so I always look at it as my role is to get users through this funnel as quickly as possible to turn community members into true evangelists. And I think 100% agreed, evangelism is the answer. It really is going to be the thing that powers that momentum of the flywheel that contributes to the growth and to the mass adoption of the Web3 industry. And I think the more that we as leaders, as business owners, as product builders can turn unaware users into evangelists, I think we are, making that contribution into growing the Web3 ecosystem. And I think to your point, yeah, 100% agreed.
Exactly. Like, I think Bitcoin, where it is today, wouldn't have gotten there if there was no evangelist. Like, if you look at it, an argument could be made that Bitcoin at the end of the day is a meme coin, which everybody believes is a store of value. And it all happened because of an evangelist. And now you have the coming president of the new leader of the free world just talked about.
Yeah, evangelism, I think, so it plays a huge role in the world that we live in today in regards to the attention economy. I was just in Mexico. I was on a panel about meme coins, and that was one of the points that we made was that, Bitcoin is a meme coin if you really look at it. The only thing that really gives it value is this community belief that, it is a store of value and the scarcity that it has, right? And how those two things play together. But I think, to your point, as long as we continue keeping the attention on it and innovating and getting more attention on it and fresh eyeballs and activating those users and eventually turning them into evangelists, that is how we're going to help the industry grow. And I think that is actually a pretty perfect segue, I think, as far as the industry growing. I mean, at P2 Ventures, right, I think you get to see a very, very wide array of new products that are on their way to entering the market, right? Everything from ideas to MVPs to mature protocols that are seeking funding. Based on all of this information and all of this data that you have, what advice would you give to startups or builders that are entering the decentralized capital markets today? And are there specific areas that they should focus on to create long-term value?
Yes, I think the first piece of advice, which is incredibly important for any builder, is your point to think long term. How in this attention economy Web3 operates is there cycles of hype and then it dies down, and sometimes these builders, I've seen builders who pivoted from gaming to something else and now they're doing AI, and it's like you have lacked conviction across these different hype cycles. It would be better if you have a strong thesis of where you want the world to be and then make it happen through your startup. So the biggest advice would be, do not fumble into the hype. Right now, a lot of like some VCs are asking their portfolio companies to launch tokens and make sure you launch your token in this bull market. You don't need to. Like, if you're building something long term, just have a strong thesis and build for the long term. Other things I would say, other advice for any startup would be similar to how you'll give it to any other startup. Maybe it may be a Web2 startup, right? Like, you have to you basically have like a, what do you call it, test out your product market fit. Make sure you have product market fit. Like, we call it, there was this term that we used to use, nail it before you scale it. So kind of nail it before you scale it. Try to achieve a product market fit with a small set of users, and then you can go around with scaling. And your product doesn't have to be live to get this product market fit. Your product could be live in a beta version with a certain set of users. Let's say if you're building a trading terminal, you could have a trading group that uses your product and gives you feedback, and you've iterated over time, and then you eventually launch it for the retail, and then retail comes and grows it because now you've perfected the product. So I think two main thing: just don't get into the hype. Second, nail it before you scale it. And third would be just build a very strong culture in your team, because at the end of the day, you're as strong as the team that you have. So
I love it. No
those
matter
would be the
what
three,
business you're in, you are always
three
in the
things.
people business, and the people are your most important asset. And it's funny, to your first point, right? Like pivoting with hype. Some of the most successful companies that I've worked with that have eventually gone on to do amazing things, either build sustainable businesses for decades to come or have amazing exits, the one unifying factor that I saw across the board was the founder's conviction that they were working on the right thing. Doesn't matter, you're almost out of capital and you can't make payroll, there's things going wrong left and right, there's regulatory concerns, there's, so many headwinds that companies can potentially face. But if a founder has conviction and they're not just looking out for the next shiny object, right? They're not just looking out for what the market is paying attention to. They're building something that they believe solves a real problem and they believe will get adoption. Sticking to that is so critical and so important. And sometimes it happens very quickly and things can grow overnight, which is usually not the case. Other times, more likely the case that these things will take 2, 3, 5, 7 years. But like you said, if you are building a long-term product, if you are building something that is going to drive value for a long time to come, maintaining that conviction and not just not straying away from it because your investors tell you to, or because the market all of a sudden is fixated on some new trend like AI. I think all of these things are great, but founders need to have conviction. So 100% agree with your point.
I agree, but I would also just add a caveat here. Have very strong conviction, but if you actually get feedback around maybe your initial belief set were wrong, don't be afraid to change things. Just don't change things because of just hype. Like, you should, uh, your what we call it, the null hypothesis, right? Your hypothesis should be disproven, and then you realize, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong. I can pivot. Pivots are not bad. It's just that when the pivots are done for the wrong reasons are bad. And on the point of conviction, I had a professor during my MBA. His name was Reza Sachu. He's done like a few $100 million of exit, like a Canadian guy. Didn't even take like fees for his professor stuff. Uh, and one thing that he talked about in our entrepreneurial class was magic happens when you commit, and that's actually true. It really stuck with me forever. Like this dude's class was like half motivation, half like class. But when he said like magic happens when you commit, and he got all of these founders to speak, to talk about their own
Yeah,
journey,
and
I think that's
I
really
think
true. It's really
10,000
true.
hours, right? As they say, it really holds true no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're working on, is just continuously showing up and making sure that you're there. It's funny, the more evolved you get and the more you grow in any industry, the more you realize that these simple platitudes actually start making a lot of sense, and in application they are so true. And to your first point, some of the smartest people in the entire world are the ones that are not afraid to change their minds when they get new data. And I think somebody that is worried about what people will think, oh, what if, will they see me as wishy-washy? Will they see me as somebody who, doesn't actually know what I want? No, that's not the case at all. I think the people that are the least worried about the public opinion of them being able to shift their mindset, when they get new data, are the ones that are going to be the most successful. So that's, yeah, absolutely a great caveat is have conviction, but be able and open to receive new data and to potentially adjust your course based on what that looks like. If there's a storm coming over there, we should probably shift a little bit just to make sure we don't hit it dead on. So, one of my favorite questions
Exactly.
for super smart people like yourself, in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you envision are the key trends or milestones for decentralized capital markets? And how do you see P2 Ventures participating in this vision, in this shift?
Uh, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it's about adoption. Like we are in the innovation cycle, and post innovation, what happens is adoption. So I do predict, uh, like the stuff that we talked about, these dex to sex ratio and the amount of perps that are happening on chain. So I do predict that in the next 5 years, for sure, the amount of volume that is happening on a spot volume, at least on a dex, would be percentage wise higher than on a sex, and there would be adoption on that front. And another thing that I predict is just TradFi leveraging more DeFi rails will happen. I think a lot of that also comes with now in the US at least. There's a more crypto friendly regime that is coming about. Um, they're also talking about making things less bureaucratic with, for the lack of a better acronym, Doge. Right? So I do feel that will bring some regulatory clarity, and that will also encourage a lot of TradFi to adopt these DeFi rails, which eventually just increases the value flow through the DeFi rails itself. So these are two broad things I would. A main guess is like adoption would increase a lot fold. I don't think the underlying DeFi, like finance, is the same thing. There's exchange of assets, there's money markets, there's derivatives, etc. The fundamental thing that you're providing is not very different. It's just that the adoption will increase, and these things themselves would be,
Absolutely.
cheaper,
And I
faster,
think just
better
to add to that, from
in
my
terms of performance.
perspective, if I do my job well, I think there will be a lot more adoption of DeFi technology in the, first of all, the unbanked populations of the world. I think there's such a major area of opportunity. So hopefully bringing more people online into the global economy. And back to what we were talking about a little while ago, is more people using Web3 technology without potentially even knowing they're using Web3 technology, really using Web3 as the rails for improving their lives and improving how they transact in the world, how they operate in the financial space, but maybe without the necessity of having all of that technical knowledge, maybe without the fear that they don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, and doing it the way that you and I would transact with, a debit or a credit card. We don't think about what's going on in the back end. We just want to make the transaction. And so I'm really hoping that we bring more people online, and I see that as currently happening. If we just work hard enough, and if we do the right things, that will continue to happen. And I think Web3 technology just proliferating into daily life, and really becoming a staple in the world that we operate in, that is, basically second nature to us.
Oh, I agree. Like, I would say on-chain banks are here to eat lunch, right, to get this retail adoption. So I'm bullish on just retail adoption, not even knowing that they're doing
Absolutely.
things on chain. So it's
Well,
just like another
Abhishek,
bank and
I
they're
know
using
that
their
we can sit
services.
here and talk for hours, and hopefully one day we will meet in person and sit down and have a dinner that will then transition into drinks, that will then transition into late night cigar conversation. But until then, it has been such a wonderful conversation, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to join me. I cannot wait for people to watch this fireside chat a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and kind of see how accurate those predictions that we made are, and kind of see what the world looks like. Before we wrap up, are there any words of wisdom that you would like to leave the community with? Anything that you would want to impart upon everybody listening?
I don't know if I have words of wisdom particularly, but I would, all I would say to everyone in the community, evangelize and get more people to see what you see in
Absolutely.
the
To
technology
the
that
moon.
you're using. Let's go.
Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Absolutely. Yeah.